Welcome to Surfacing. In this episode, hosts Lisa Welchman and Andy Vitale speak to Denise Jacobs, who is a speaker, author, and creativity evangelist. This episode saw discussion of Denise's evolution from digital maker to creative support system for the digital maker community, her book, Banish Your Inner Critic, and Denise's latest project, which focuses on how leaders can curate an environment that fosters creativity.
Okay, how's Charlotte treating you?
I haven't seen much of it because of the pandemic. I'm literally hunkered down.
Yeah.
But I feel like the last time I saw you was in Minneapolis.
It was in Minneapolis, and we went to go and have Ethiopian food, which was
yeah.
Why does every guest have a food connection, Andy?
I don't know. It's how we connect. That's how Lisa and I met. We met at a conference and had dinner in a hookah bar with Kevin Hoffman.
That's funny. Wow.
It's groovy. Well, it's good to have you on the podcast, Denise. I wanted to talk to you. You and I did something together for one of Lou Rosenfeld's events, Enterprise UX or something like that. We were on a panel together. But on that panel, we didn't actually get to talk a lot about the work that you do. And so
we did not
I really wanted to talk to
you
about what you do and all of that other kind of stuff. So thanks for accepting our invitation.
Of course. I was just like, wait, the both of you guys together? Yes, please. Thank you very much for asking.
Yeah, we've been collaborating since the pandemic, since right before the pandemic. So it's been an exciting just over a year. But yeah, definitely thanks for coming on with us. I just, for me, I know you, which, everyone knows you kind of, so that's wonderful. But what's going on with you? What are you up to?
Well, the thing that it's interesting. I've had a lot of mixed emotions about this, and have felt a lot of professional guilt about this. But that really, what's going on? Like the pandemic has really prompted this like huge nesting response from me. So, in the last, I wouldn't say a year, but probably since May, I've just been doing, actually probably since April, like first kind of started with working on my garden and, trying to get my yard and my garden together, and kind of, having the aspiration of making a food forest in my backyard, which I have a lot of things in pots, but I haven't actually planted them in the ground yet because the raised beds that I was planning to build last year are going to be built this year instead. But also just like getting things fixed in my house. I put on this very cool wood slat facade on my house with this very cool upcycled cedar that I got for free from a guy on OfferUp. And just, it's like kind of, little by little, I'm getting these things done that I've been wanting to do for years. And now I have I have a painter here painting a bathroom that has been in the state of peeling disarray for years now. And it's like, it's not peeling in there. And I'm like, what else can I use? So I'm just like really finally taking up the full amount of space of my house.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Like clearing piles, making it your home. But you were critical of yourself about that. And,
that's
that's reminding me of this great book that I just read called Banish Your Inner Critic.
I've heard it's really good.
This woman, maybe she doesn't know what she's talking about, but it was pretty good. And so it's amazing how you can write a whole book about something and then fall into your own traps anyway.
Yeah. And the thing is that, and it's I'm so prone, and I know this about myself, and it's like, so it's one of those things where, I wrote the book because I needed it. It wasn't like I wrote the book because I had all the answers and I had, basically reached a state of nirvana. I wrote it because like these were all things that I had struggled with so much. And I was like, I want answers for myself to help me have tools to deal with these issues and these feelings. And I bet other people probably want these tools too. And every time I would speak on it, people would be like, it was like you were in my head and you were there when I was trying to write my dissertation and I was doing my MFA and, and me and my job every day and, me in the meeting last week. And I was like, yeah, because this is a pretty universal thing. So I think for me, part of this criticism and, the thing is I work for myself so that I can do things like this, right? But then I do things like, I'm going to take, I'm going to spend like 2 or 3 days a week working, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the time, plus the weekends, like getting caught up on all these projects because you can't do them in 2 days. And then there's this thing called rest. I've heard tell of this thing called resting and not doing stuff all the time, which I definitely want to explore too. So, and I've heard that weekends
I don't know,
are
Denise,
for
that all sounds kind of outrageous. I mean, it's one thing to have like a balance between work and taking care of your environment, but you put resting on top of it and it seems a little crazy.
I know. It's crazy talk. So I just, I feel critical because I have a lot of people in my cohort, a lot of colleagues, have books coming out now, and that like writing a book is not the hard part of the process. Marketing the book is actually the hard part, the like really heavy lifting, I think. And so, it's a very visible time now for all these people. Like for my book, I'm doing a summit, and I've invited all these people to come and do and this and that, and I'm on this podcast and I'm speaking here and all this, and I'm just like, I am cleaning air conditioner vents. That's what I'm doing.
It's amazing that the pandemic has kind of driven a lot of digital people to do analog things.
Absolutely.
For me, we bought a veggie pod and it came late and we couldn't put it together. And it's like you're doing. You could plant in it, but it doesn't sit on the ground. It's like a container
I've seen them. And it's got watering and everything connected to it. Yeah,
exactly.
Those are cool.
We're finally getting ours set up a year after we bought it. So.
Nice. But I think there is that. And I think, honestly, in the digital industry that we're in, I mean, I think a lot of us already, even without the pandemic, have gotten to a place where it's like, I need to do something with my hands. Like I can't just be in my head all the time. I can't just be, doing all this kind of strategic problem solving in my head. Like I need something to balance out. And so, I know we all know a lot of people who are musicians and craftspeople and everything just naturally anyway, as kind of a counterbalance or a balance to all of the kind of intellectual work that we do.
So Denise, I mean, you started out as a digital maker, and along the way you've transitioned to basically become a support system for digital makers. I want to hear. Yeah, I just want to hear more about that transition.
Yeah, so I was going along, minding my business, being a front end developer type, and actually, honestly, if I think about it, I've always been a support person for makers, if that makes any sense. So, way back a billion years ago, in 1998, or actually 97, I started making handmade herbal soaps, and I started selling them. And then people were like, "What's in it?" And I was like, "It's super easy. I can show you how to make it." And then I started teaching people how to make herbal soap. And I discovered that I loved teaching so much that actually became, I mean, that wasn't the only thing that I was doing, but that actually became kind of like the primary focus of my soap making business, was to be teaching people how to make soap rather than making soap and selling it. And when I was doing that, I also, because I discovered that I love teaching so much, I was like, oh, well, I want to teach other classes, like what other things can I teach that are things that I like to do that I think are interesting. And so I ended up creating this kind of whole catalog, if you will, of herbal related craft courses and, other craft courses, recycled paper, stationery making, and herbal bath product making, and organic gardening, and all of these good things. And I think at some point I used to talk to people about it, and I'd say, oh, I'm like a creativity midwife. And so like I'm here to kind of help, catch people's creativity babies. Like they come to my workshops and they get to play creatively for like 3 hours. And it helps, it stimulates this. I find it really interesting that then I go into web design. I mean, I was already doing web design and web development at that point in time, but then I ended up again eventually teaching it. And then it was like I was helping people kind of catch their kind of creativity babies, but in terms of like digital making, right? And then when I wrote my book, The CSS Detective Guide, then I had to like essentially catch my own creativity baby. I had to kind of be my own, like there was no midwife there. So I had to birth the baby myself.
And how was that different being on the other side of that? Because, it's really easy to tell other people to do things, but then there's experiencing it yourself. How was that different?
So the difference.
Or what did you learn?
Well, so what I learned was, basically the difference was the dealing with all the fears around creating, which I don't know if I had really tuned into when I was doing the craft classes and stuff like that. I knew that I had my own kind of source, my own experience of kind of creative anxiety, wondering if I was creative enough, wondering if the work that I did was any good, that sort of thing. For some reason, I don't know if I necessarily made the connection with that was something that other people were going through when they potentially were taking my courses. And then when I was writing my book, it was something that I was confronted with every day. And so like that, doing that and kind of being my own kind of creativity doula and midwife made it so that it really put me in touch with this kind of process of, oh, you really need to deal with these fears. You can't get to this other side unless you deal with basically your inner critic. You can't get to the other side unless you deal with your self-doubt. And then it forced me to develop, either look up or develop techniques for being able to get past it. And that's a lot of the stuff that I teach actually is based on my own experience of having to figure out, okay, I'm writing again today. I'm afraid that it's going to be really I'm afraid I'm not a good writer or that it's not good enough or anything. Okay, how about this? Let's just go ahead and I'm just going to give myself permission to write a really crappy sentence. And then I'm going to let myself write a really crappy paragraph. And then you know what? The whole chapter is going to be crap and I don't care. I'm just going to write it. And having tricks like that help me actually get over the finish line and help me get to the point where I could. And then, later on it was like, oh, it actually wasn't that bad. And that's actually what editing is for and what editors are for. So it was really interesting to to, and kind of doing this myself for myself, like I said, forced me into realizing all this stuff that eventually ended up creating a new path for me.
Hearing you talk about the inner critic in this way reminds me, when I think of digital makers, that part of the challenge is, you said two things: give yourself permission to make messes and not be perfect. And I would say that the digital maker community is full of that, right? But then you said something, the part that I don't think the digital community does, which is you can always go back and fix it. Right. And so, but I don't think that the way that community is architected, that second component, they're all about this sort of creativity and free and no inner critic. Like, it must be great. I'm great. Look at this thing I built. It runs. I'm great. But there's not a lot of this sort of counterbalancing part, which is what you're talking about, which is you're being free because you know that that's not the last iteration.
That's right. You're being, and also you're being free because, like, maybe you don't know, but maybe you recognize or you sense that nothing is going to come out if you don't, like, open those gates, right? And it's going to be, the process is tortured when you don't let things flow, right? When you're self-critical, when you're self-judgmental, when you're afraid of other people's judgment and stuff, that's when the process is tortured and painful. When you just let things out, it's not tortured and painful at all. As a matter of fact, well, no, I won't say as a matter of fact, but as an interesting aside or tangent, I have discovered a new to me artist. And I'm kind of obsessed with her work. And it's this woman, you probably have heard of her. Her name is Hilma auf Klint. So she's not Klimt. She was born in the mid 1800s and like in 1864, and basically started really coming into her own with abstract art in the early 1900s. And so she predates Kandinsky and Klee and like all these people.
Oh, I'm
all
looking
those
at some
people,
of it. I Googled it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All of those people got inspiration from her stuff.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh my God. I'm so obsessed with her work.
Well, because it's gorgeous. We'll have to put some in the show notes for this, because they're just really beautiful pieces.
It's just beautiful pieces. And she would do these things. One of the things that's really cool, and this is what led me to talking about her, is that she was part of these Theosophical Society. She was actually part of this group of women called the Five. And they were these women who were artists, but they were also part of this kind of more spiritual bent.
Yeah. That was a great time for that stuff, yeah.
And so one of the things that Hilma would do at some point in time in her career, instead of like being super in control of stuff, it would basically be like she would just like open herself up, and whatever came through her, that's what she would paint. That's what she would draw, and that's what she would paint. And then you see like the results of it, this just beautiful, organic, all of this, the rich colors, all these layers of meaning and depth, and the power of opening yourself up to what can come through you. I mean, it's such a powerful thing. And yet so many of us are so trying to be so in control of what comes through us. And then we're wondering why creating doesn't feel good.
Yeah. What I want to understand more, tying it back to like design and development, current day, like creating products. What's the balance between putting things out there and testing and learning, and then actually going back and iterating because it's not finished, instead of like just checking it off of a box, it's done, and moving on to the next thing?
Yeah. And the funny thing is that I personally, because of just the way my own psychological makeup is constructed, I can't understand not wanting to go back and making something right or useful or highly functional or whatever. Right? Like I can't understand why somebody wouldn't want to iterate on something.
Right.
Maybe it's part of my perfectionist tendencies or whatever, but it's like when I do something, I make something, I'm like, oh, okay. Like it's a constant. And this actually, speaks to kind of more of an agile approach where it's like you're constantly iterating. Like you do it, you test it, you see, okay, how does this work? Okay, this doesn't work that well, or this part does work and this part doesn't, or whatever. Okay, let's fix this. Like, how can we fix this? For me, like that's the most important thing of it, because you want to be making things, we're making digital products. We're creating these things that are there for people to use. We want people to be able to use them well, right? One of the things that I like to tell people is when they're having trouble coming up with creative ideas to start writing down 10 ideas a day. It's something that I got from James Altucher, and he calls it being an idea machine. And I'm like, write down 10 ideas a day and do like bug lists, like things that bug you, right? And so when you're paying attention to things that bother you, the things that don't work well or aren't quite right or whatever, then you have the opportunity to make them, you make them right and make them work. Also, from again, back to a digital producers or creators perspective, that will actually give you more market share, better ROI, like more loyal customers, like, happier clients, like better reviews. I mean, all of these things. And I've often talked to people, like people who aren't necessarily tech savvy or don't consider themselves tech savvy, and they'll say, well, I don't know anything about user experience. And I'm like, yes, but when something bothers you, and when something doesn't work. When you go to a website or you go to order something and you abandon the order process in the middle because there was something annoying about it or something that you didn't understand.
Yeah, you made me fill my name in one too many times, right?
Or there's something that wasn't clear, or you had to look too hard. Like I recently started using this thing called Harvest something or another. Anyway, the Happy Harvest. Anyway, one of these produce delivery things where they give you kind of like ugly produce. And I recently lost my debit card and I had to cancel it and get a new one. And so they were like, your debit card's been declined. I was like, oh, yeah, right. Okay. And I went in there and they were like, okay, go to the page where it's the account information. And can I tell you guys, and you guys will totally appreciate this. They have the account information page. It has all the stuff with my name and my address and everything. And then it has on the second thing, it says payment information, but there's no place. It just says it in text, payment information. There's no link or anything like that. Then it's got a CAPTCHA box that says, I'm not a robot.
Oh my God. That thing, man, if I could go find the screwdriver that undoes that robot.
But there's nothing that says, click here to be able to access your account information. It just has this and I swear to you, I went to that page. I'm a tech savvy person. I used to do UX. I speak at UX conferences all the time. It took me 4 times of going to this stupid page before I was like, how do I get to my account information? And finally I clicked on the I'm not a robot, and then my credit card information showed up. And I was like,
that's the most counterintuitive thing. I'm not a robot, and here's your. One of the things I want to go back to one of the things you said a few minutes back, which is that your psychological makeup means you want to iterate, you want to improve on things, and that you maybe said this, or I inferred it from what you said, that you would imagine most people would want that. I think I'm disagreeing with that a little bit and thinking. We had a conversation with Per Axbom. I can now say his name.
He's so great.
Yeah, he's great. We had a conversation with him, and we ended up talking a lot about compassion. Mm-hmm. And so I do think, and this is might be a little bit judgment, but it's not a rich judgment that I'm about to make. I'm just saying this as a fact. I believe that there's a set of people who just don't operate in that zone. They're like, look at the cool thing I made. And that's the end of it.
And scene.
Right. Yeah. That's just, look at the cool thing I made. It works. And then that's it. It's over for them, as opposed to, wow, can I share it with other people? Or and if this person is using it, are they enjoying using it? I think there's a whole set of, in particular, digital makers that do not continue to have that conversation.
That's like making a meal and setting it in front of somebody and walking away.
People do that.
Right. And I'm just like, don't you want to know, like, how they liked it, did this, or
maybe next time I could make it better.
Like making something and not tasting it. I can't with these folks.
It's wild. There's a lot of design Twitter arguments about new design tools. And, I love to see people play and experiment and learn and share that knowledge. But I'm seeing so many tweets about people that are building, like, I could create Connect 4 using Figma now. This is so great. It's like, why are we doing it? Why are we using it for that? There's so many, like, we could be designing a website for a nonprofit, and I'm just, like, baffled by that.
And kind of like you were saying, Lisa, like, some people have that kind of more civic mindedness, and some people have the more self-centered mindedness or self-absorbed mindedness. I also may think hopefully maybe it's an age thing, maybe it's a seniority, level in the industry and in your career, where maybe when you're younger, you feel like you need to prove stuff to people, and you're drawn to the sparkly chicken. And then when you get older and you get more in your career, you're like, I don't have to prove anything to anybody. How can I help folks with this skill that I have, or the skill set that I have?
I like people who are younger. I enjoy that energy, and I think there's this incredible amount of creativity that comes out of that space. And I think one of the things that's missing, particularly in the digital maker community, but just overall, generationally, at least in the U.S. and Western Europe, so I'm going to generalize across the two cultures that I know the best, is just this sense of mentorship. And it's bi-directionally the case. There's a lot of things that people who have been around the block could help inform with younger people, not in terms of do it the way we did it or we know more than you, but just kind of like, you know what? If you do that, it's not going to work, and here's why. And vice versa, feeding that combination of sort of youthful excitement and energy plus knowledge and expertise that only comes with years could create incredible products and experiences for people. But instead we're fighting with each other. Millennials versus Gen, calling each other, all of that other kind of stuff. But anyhow,
and also I think too, then there's all the ageism that's prevalent, and so then there are fewer opportunities for people who are seasoned professionals to be able to have that mentorship relationship with people, because they're just getting replaced, and they're not in the system.
They're not in the system anymore. All of this conversation really reminds me of my favorite chapter in your book, which is chapter 8, Step into Your Creative Power. And so I read that it was really helpful for me. I mean, I'm pretty good at creativity, but it was a really helpful book for me to read, and I learned some things and some techniques. So thank you. Personally,
ooh, tell me. I want to hear.
It was
excited.
The reminder that I needed was the "Don't be a perfectionist" one, which is probably what I'm going to do is good enough, and you can iterate on it, which is why I was talking about that earlier. Just that I know that, but it's amazing how long that stuff hangs with you sort of for the rest of your life. But this chapter 8 thing for me was really resonant because, I work with digital teams all the time, and it's talking about sort of what conditions need to be in place in order for you to do all of the things that you recommend that you do in your book. Like what is that? And I thought, how often on a digital team, a maker team inside of an organization, are those conditions there? Like, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to do this because I play piano and I want to become a better piano player, and I'm going to make it so I'm down on the the block, playing in a club, right? And I'm going to will myself into that very personal sort of active thing, jump all the hurdles for that. It's another thing to be inside of an organization, and Andy can probably speak to this because I haven't worked inside of a large organization since 1999. So because I can't really deal with those dynamics particularly well over the long term. But I really wondered what your reflections were about when you think about that particular situation of being at work and trying to express your creativity, being in a container that has constraints, right? And cultural, behavioral, and business constraints. Is that any different than someone who's just sort of, trying to become a better painter, or, on their spare time? Or do you think all the same things can apply the same?
No, I mean, I think it's really difficult when you're in a, it's okay. So let me take this back. We're just going full circle for all kinds of things, but I'm in this my newest room of my house that I have reclaimed because I no longer have housemates. Officially housemate free as of last month. And so I've turned this room, I call it the nap room, the sitting room, the second room. But one of the things that is prevalent in this room is that I have plants. And similar to a plant, if a plant is in a situation where it's not getting its needs met, if it doesn't have enough light, if it doesn't have enough moisture, if it doesn't have the right temperature, it's not going to do well. It's not going to flourish. And similarly, if you find yourself in a situation where, your plant requirements aren't being met, like the culture is off, or the management is off, or the team isn't a good fit or whatever, then you're not going to be able to flourish too. And you could do all kinds of, tricks and techniques and tactics and stuff like that, but they'll only get you so far, right? If you need more sunlight, you need more sunlight. And that's the facts. Like trying to, compensate with other things is not going to make up for the fact that you just need more sun. Metaphorically speaking, that is. So I do think it also is, that there is a certain level of kind of being honest with yourself and having these moments where you're just like, oh, I really actually can't thrive in this environment. And sometimes you don't know that until you have changed environments, right? Sometimes that's not something it's not the kind of knowledge that you have until you're in a different thing. You're like, oh my gosh, that was really rough. Like I thought it was okay, but it clearly was not. And I'm able to, thrive now. So, certainly the stuff that I've written about in my book and the exercises and all that stuff are incredibly effective. And then I will say up to a certain point, right? And then there's that. The cool thing is that I just finished filming at the beginning of February. I just finished filming my latest LinkedIn Learning course, and that one is going to be I don't know what the final title of it's going to be, but I think it's going to be something like Creativity for Leaders or Developing a Creativity Mindset for Leaders. And it's designed to help this one and the one that just came out in January, which is called The Business Case for Creativity, are designed to help leaders think about creativity differently. The Business Case for Creativity is designed to help leaders start to set up the infrastructure. They kind of make the brain shift so they can start to set up the infrastructure to create a culture of creativity. And then the Creativity for Leaders is to help leaders, first of all, get in touch with their own creativity. And then second of all, start to create an environment that helps to, promote creativity for the people who they work with, that work for them.
I think that's That's a great space, only because, I mean, I lead designers. So being a designer, a design leader, like our space is full of creativity, but having to teach that to other leaders and having to kind of like introduce them to our environment and let them be part of it and learn by doing and getting excited and being inspirational is great. There's another piece of it as leading creatives or designers or front-end developers, pretty much anyone that's, creating products. What I see is like, it's like, how do you create this environment? Obviously, psychological safety is key.
Huge.
And transparency, but also like you could create a culture of learning, but there are people that are like, I don't want to learn anymore. Like I'm good at what I do and this is what I want to do. And then there are others that are like, I just want to keep learning and growing. So it's this balance of an environment.
Right. And then the other thing I was going to say too, Andy, to what you were saying is I think especially with leaders and like leaders in business, especially when they're in departments that aren't considered creative departments, right? And I think that there's this false dichotomy. There's this false kind of narrative around what's creative, quote unquote, and what's not creative. And calling teams creative teams and other teams not creative, like, really? So I think that's actually one of the first things that needs to be addressed is this kind of barrier or kind of differentiator between what's considered creative and what isn't. And then also helping leaders who are in areas that aren't typically or traditionally considered creative, helping them see, first of all, where they are creative, how their teams and the departments are creative, and then also helping them understand kind of in their own language why it's important, like why creativity is important and why it's a critical skill and something for them to focus on, or another thing for them to focus on for them and their teams to be able to produce better and function better. And I think that's the other thing too, is making sure that it's explained in a way, or that it's, the language, like I said, around it is that this isn't this thing that's over there for this other team. This is something that is valuable and important for the entire organization on multiple levels, on a cultural level, on a financial level, on a productivity level, et cetera.
100%. I've worked with some of the most creative people who were scientists and in finance and like legal teams that understood how to do things differently and could, take those learnings and teach other teams how to think differently. It's like you said, creativity is everyone is creative in one way or another. They have things about them. So it's just unlocking that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I want to shout out to the poor little person that doesn't want to learn and it doesn't want to change just because, I'm designing teams all the time. Right. And so, yes, everyone should be trying to do more and making sure that they're working well, et cetera. But there's also a place for those people. Right. And so sometimes you actually need someone and in a spot where they're literally going to do the same thing over and over again, and they're happy about that. And maybe when they come to work every day, that's not really how they actualize themselves creatively. Maybe they go home and they play the lute. And they're just coming to work to do it. And I think what can be really beautiful about team design is figuring out where you must have that creativity and where you must not, and not trying to make everybody all the same, and sort of being super inclusive and taking advantage of who people are and where they are. I think we were talking about this before, Andy, about just, you were telling me that you hire people. Right? You hire people first, right, and then you kind of figure out where this person going to fit into this machine, as opposed to just basically engineering the machine and then making people fit to it. And so that's just my little shout out to the poor person who, who wants to put stamps on postcards all day long and then go home and probably does something really amazing, or maybe not. So it's right, fantastic. I mean, just back to this, I'm really fascinated by this whole piece that we've talked to death already, but I want to touch back on it again. It is just sort of like creativity in the digital maker space. And it's just such a juicy topic in my head because of what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, which is there's this full set of people who, I don't know, you can tell me, they're making a lot of stuff. I don't know if that's creativity. They're outputting a lot of stuff and they're doing it in an agile way and it's coming really fast. I don't necessarily think they're creating things, but I don't know if that's actually creativity or just production. Like, whether or not they're just writing a lot of code really, really fast is different than that. And I'm just really curious because you know both of these things. You know creativity and you know the digital maker world and you know the logistics of that world. What do you just think about that dynamic of what's going on? What's sort of driving all of that frenzy? And is it a positive creativity production process, or is it both, or whatever? I just would love to hear you talk about that.
You ask outstanding questions. I just want to say, for the record, I feel like that's kind of a hard spot because. I mean, like, what's driving that? I feel like so much of what's driving that is, like profit and, growth and all this stuff. And I mean, like, like business growth and everything and market share and things like that. And in terms of whether that is creative, I mean, I feel like the answer is probably like sometimes it is creative, and sometimes it's kind of like the digital maker equivalent of like putting stamps on envelopes, right? That actually brought to mind my last housemate works for the Red Cross, and they have a lot of volunteers, and she had one volunteer that he was really good at shredding paper, like that was his thing. Like
someone has to do it,
and he loved doing it, and he was he was like he ended up having to go up to his like up north to live with his family. And, but, he'd talk to Kamala and he'd be like, well, I mean, who's taking care of the paper shredding now? Because, are they doing a good job? Are they, and it's like that paper shredding was like, that was his thing. And I was like, it's kind of cool that somebody likes that and that's his thing. And then we know that we can always give paper shredding to, whatever his name was, Kevin or whatever. And he'll take care of it. And he's going to do a great job with shredding the paper. It's not going to pile up because he likes to do it, So I do think there, in some ways I feel like there is a place for like the cranking out, and then there is a place for craftsmanship and making things better. And they serve different audiences. Another kind of thing back to like what's happening in my own personal life. I have gotten really into, I haven't actually started doing it yet, but I've been watching a lot of videos on refurbishing furniture. So I've been watching this guy, has a YouTube channel. It's called Dashner Design and Restoration. And he makes these like lovely, 10 to 15 minute videos where he finds some mid-century modern piece for $5 in a thrift store, and then he'll like strip it all down and fix anything that needs to be fixed. He'll re-glue the joints and replace dowels and all the stuff, and then he'll stain it again, and then he'll like seal it. And first of all, it is one of the most relaxing, meditative, wonderful videos. I watch that to relax now. But then also it's like this, the craftsmanship and the care and the attention that he puts into every single thing that he refinishes it's just lovely and inspiring and stuff. But then I also know that there are people who will take one of those things and instead of like lovingly restoring it to its former glory, well, paint it and put chalk paint on it and put different,
bedazzle it.
pulls on it and to bedazzle it. And actually, I'm part of this group on Facebook. This woman, she doesn't do it with mid-century modern pieces, for which I'm grateful, but she'll get like old pieces and she'll paint them, but she'll make these beautiful, like intricate paintings where it's like flower, and even like when you open up the drawers when they open have like a painting that is continuous. I mean, gorgeous stuff. And I'm like, look, I'm not mad at you for doing this like amazing paint job on this piece that probably would have been like, I also would have loved to just see it, like stained, maple and, coated with a clear satin coat. So my own kind of professional concern for people is that I want them to figure out how to get in touch with the creativity that they need and to be able to do whatever it is that they do the best that they can, right? So, and then, then if like, in an ideal and perfect world, if everybody's doing that, then you were able to design these wonderful teams like you design, Lisa, where you've got all of the people in the right place and do like you do, Andy, where you hire the person and then you figure out where they go, but it's because they are actualized enough of themselves and really acting in their brilliance and really bringing forth their creativity that you're able to put them in the right place. Right. And that they're able to do the work, and then collectively that team or that group is able to collectively create the product or create the service or, whatever it is that is really successful, that works for people, that helps people and all of these things. I mean, that's kind of how I see kind of the chain of causality working.
On behalf of all the digital makers, thanks for doing all of that work. That's a very generous thing to do with people, what you do, right? It's a very personal and generous thing. So I'm sincere when I say thanks for all that.
No.
Yeah, definitely.
My pleasure. I mean, that was, one of the things early on when I first started doing this, and Andy, you had said this earlier, like you support digital makers and doing stuff. And I remember thinking, I want to be like the, I don't know if I said like the therapist or the personal professional development person for people in the web industry. I think when I started coming into this creativity inner critic stuff, I was like, oh, okay, like I don't really want to make websites anymore. That's not my jam. I was like, but for people who are making stuff and, all the people that I know are making stuff, like all of y'all, like all of us are struggling with an inner critic and perfectionism and procrastination and imposter syndrome and all this stuff. I was like, I want to help y'all deal with all of that. Like, I want to help y'all get to the place where you feel like you're a badass because all of your ideas are flowing and everything's on and popping and, and it's all going. That's what I want to help people do.
Nice. No better way to end than on that. So, Denise, we can't thank you enough for your time. I would love for you to have the opportunity to just tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. So you can find me on my website, denisejacobs.com. Follow me on Twitter, Denise Jacobs. On Instagram, Denise Jacobs. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Denise R. Jacobs. And am I Denise R. Jacobs on LinkedIn? I am Denise Jacobs on LinkedIn. And then on Facebook, you can follow my fan page or whatever they're calling them these days. It's denisejacobs.com, all written out. Also, I encourage you to go and please go get and buy a copy and buy one for a friend of my book, Banish Your Inner Critic, which you can get on Amazon. And you may actually be able to find in some Barnes & Nobles in the bargain book section. And also, please go and check out
It's a great book. I just read it.
It's a great book. Lisa just read it. And also go and check out my courses on LinkedIn Learning. I have Banish Your Inner Critic to Unleash Creativity, Creative Collaboration, The Business Case for Creativity, and Creativity for All, Hacking the Creative Brain. So lots of cool things and wonderful things that you can go and follow up and connect.
She's
and all that
prolific
stuff.
and wise. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a really fun way to spend an hour chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy surfacing, please rate, review, and follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/surfacingpodcast. On the Surfacing Patreon page, you can support the podcast or become a member and gain access to exclusive monthly Ask Me Anything podcasts with Lisa and Andy. If you have suggestions for guests or a topic you'd like to hear about on Surfacing, please reach out via the contact form found at surfacingpodcast.com.